Imagine a war so intense and yet so underrepresented in our history textbooks, the First Indochina War. This was not just any war, it was a clash of ideologies, a struggle for independence, and a prelude to a much larger conflict that would engulf the world. Despite its significance, it remains largely unseen in our collective memory. The First Indochina War, often overshadowed by the Second World War and the Vietnam War, is a pivotal chapter in the history of Southeast Asia. It was a war that tested the mettle of nations, or a war that saw the birth of new alliances, and a war that altered the course of global politics. From December 1946 to August 1954, the world watched as France fought to regain control over its former colony, Vietnam, only to face a formidable adversary in the form of the Viet Minh, a nationalist movement led by Ho Chi Minh. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a war of wills, a fight for the heart and soul of a nation. The war was a crucible for Vietnam, shaping its future and laying the groundwork for the conflicts that were to follow. It was a war that defined the identity of a nation, a war that left an indelible mark on the psyche of the Vietnamese people. But why is it important to recognize this war? Because it is a testament to the indomitable spirit of the people who fought for their freedom, and it serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of imperial ambition. Because it is a part of our shared history, a chapter that needs to be read and understood. Because it is a story that needs to be told. So, let us embark on this journey together. Let us delve into the annals of history and uncover the truth about this unseen war. Let us remember the sacrifices made, the battles fought, and the lessons learned. A war that shaped the future of Vietnam, and indeed Southeast Asia, is about to unravel before you. In the aftermath of World War II, a power vacuum emerged in Southeast Asia. This was particularly evident in the region known as Indochina, a patchwork of territories long subjected to French colonial rule. The French, having suffered heavy losses in the war, were keen on reasserting their domination over Indochina, but the winds of change were beginning to stir. Indochina, comprised of modern-day Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, had been under the French rule for nearly a century. The French exploited its rich resources, relegating the local population to a life of hardship and servitude. This sowed the seeds of discontent amongst the populace, giving rise to a strong sense of nationalism. At the forefront of this growing nationalist movement was a man named Ho Chi Minh. An ardent believer in the ideals of freedom and self-determination, Ho Chi Minh was a visionary, a revolutionary, and a beacon of hope for the oppressed Vietnamese people. He was inspired by the principles of communism and saw it as a pathway to free his homeland from the yoke of colonial rule. In 1941, Ho Chi Minh formed the Viet Minh, a coalition of nationalists and communists united in their common goal of ending French colonial rule. The Viet Minh was not merely a political entity, but a symbol of resistance and the embodiment of Vietnamese nationalism. They were driven by a shared dream, a free and independent Vietnam. Yet, the French were not ready to relinquish their hold. They dismissed the Viet Minh as mere rebels, refusing to acknowledge the growing clamor for independence. This underestimation of the Viet Minh and the Vietnamese spirit of resistance would prove to be a grave mistake. Meanwhile, the world watched, oblivious to the brewing storm in this corner of Southeast Asia. Little did they know that these were the early rumblings of a conflict that would reverberate around the globe, shaping the course of history. In the face of oppressive colonial rule, Vietnam found its voice, and the stage was set for an epic struggle. The seeds of conflict had been sown, and the First Indochina War was on the horizon. The year 1946 marked the start of a brutal 8-year conflict. The First Indochina War had now begun, and it was anything but ordinary. The war ignited with the Haiphong incident, an event that, if we get, propelled the conflict to another level. In the bustling city of Haiphong, tensions between the French and the Viet Minh reached a boiling point. The Viet Minh, under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, sought to assert their independence, while the French were determined to re-establish control. The result was a tragic clash on November 23, 1946, leading to the death of thousands of Vietnamese civilians. This incident solidified the resolve of the Viet Minh to fight for their independence, and thus the war had truly begun. The Battle of Hanoi, also known as the Christmas Eve Battle, was the next significant event. It was a brutal, bloody conflict that took place from December 19th to December 24th, 1946. The French launched a full-scale assault on Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, which was held by the Viet Minh. Despite their determination and resilience, the Viet Minh were outmatched, and Hanoi fell to the French. But the Viet Minh were far from defeated. They adopted guerrilla warfare tactics, a style of combat that played to their strengths. They knew their terrain better than the French, and they used this knowledge to their advantage. These tactics kept the French off balance and proved highly effective in prolonging the war. The Viet Minh's guerrilla warfare was not just a military tactic, but a reflection of their determination and resilience. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and their independence. Every ambush, every strike was a testament to their unyielding spirit. With each passing year, the war intensified and the stakes became higher. The First Indochina War was a conflict of ideologies, a struggle for independence, and a testament to the human spirit's resilience. As the war ignited and the battles raged on, the world watched, bearing witness to a conflict that would shape the course of history. The tide of the war changed dramatically at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. This was the moment where the undercurrents of struggle surged to the surface, irrevocably altering the course of the First Indochina War. In the valleys of northwestern Vietnam, Dien Bien Phu lay nestled, a small town about to become the stage for a pivotal showdown. The French, confident of their superior firepower and tactical prowess, established a fortified camp here, intending it as a bait to draw out the Viet Minh forces from their jungle hideouts. But the Viet Minh, under the astute leadership of General Von Nguyen Giap, had other plans. Giap's strategy was revolutionary, even audacious. His forces hauled heavy artillery pieces up the steep, forested hills surrounding Dien Bien Phu, an act thought impossible by French military strategists. When the battle began in earnest, the French were taken aback by the ferocity and precision of the Viet Minh's artillery barrage, their fortifications becoming a trap of their own making. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu raged on for 55 grueling days. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Viet Minh forces demonstrated a resilience and tenacity that surprised the world. Their victory over the French forces was not just a military triumph, but a psychological one as well. The global perception of the war shifted dramatically following the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The French, once seen as the invincible colonial overlords, were now perceived as vulnerable, their aura of invincibility shattered. The Viet Minh, on the other hand, emerged as a formidable force capable of standing up to a major world power. The underdogs had triumphed, and the world was watching. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu was a turning point, not just in the First Indochina War, but in the broader narrative of decolonization and the struggle for national liberation. The First Indochina War ended, but its echoes were felt far and wide. The conclusion of this brutal conflict was marked by the Geneva Conference in 1954. There, the world powers convened and a resolution was reached. Vietnam was divided along the 17th parallel into North and South, a decision that would come to shape the fate of Vietnam and its people for decades to come. The war's end was not a simple cessation of hostilities. It was a seismic shift that sent ripples throughout the world. The First Indochina War was not just a regional conflict, it was a significant chapter in the larger narrative of the Cold War. The struggle between the forces of communism and capitalism played out on this Southeast Asian stage, with global superpowers wielding influence from the wings. The First Indochina War, however, was not the final act. It set the stage for another, even more devastating conflict. The Second Indochina War, more commonly known as the Vietnam War. The division of Vietnam at the Geneva Conference was a temporary solution that soon unraveled. The North, under Ho Chi Minh's leadership, and the South, backed by the United States and other Western powers, found themselves on a collision course. A war that had ostensibly ended was about to reignite with a vengeance. The legacy of the First Indochina War is complex and far-reaching. It's a tale of nationalism, of the struggle for self-determination, and of the global power dynamics of the mid-20th century. It's a story of a people's fight for freedom and the tragic costs of that fight. It's a chapter in history that continues to inform the present, shaping our understanding of conflict of power and of humanity's indomitable spirit. The First Indochina War, a brutal testament to the struggle for freedom, left indelible marks on the pages of history.